Zionism wants us to believe something that no other group on earth could ever get away with. That you can disappear from a land for 2,000 years, show up with a religious book in a family tree that stops at maybe, and claim sovereignty over a country that already has people living in it. Let's unpack the absurdity piece by piece. The modern right to land and nationhood doesn't rely on myth or emotions. It's based on facts. International law says a people have the right to self-determination if they've lived continuously on a land, have cultural and historical ties, and either govern it or are recognized as the indigenous population. Palestinians check every box. Zionists, well, they don't even bring a pencil. Zionism argues that Jews have a birthright to Palestine because their ancestors once lived there 2,000 years ago? Not recently, not even in the last millennium. Can you imagine anyone else trying this? Try walking into Italy and claiming land because you think your ancestors were Roman citizens, or applying for Irish citizenship without a single document, just vibes and a scroll. You'd get laughed out of the embassy. Yet Zionists have somehow convinced the world that their return is legitimate, and not just as visitors, but as rulers, with exclusive control over people who never left. Let's get one thing straight. Zionism didn't rise from the deserts of Judea. It was born in 19th century Europe, just like German, Polish, and Italian nationalism. But there's a key difference. Those nationalisms fought for their own people in their own homelands. Zionism, on the other hand, was a group of European intellectuals saying, hey, we haven't lived in this land for 2,000 years. Let's go build a country there, even if others are already living on it. That's not liberation movement. That's colonization with a religious twist. Zionists knew Palestine had a native population. So from the start, they created a zero-sum game. Either Jews dominate or Palestinians exist, but not both. As early Zionist leaders Zev Jabotinsky bluntly admitted, Zionist colonization could only happen against the will of the natives. There was no peaceful path, only force. To justify this, they invented a myth. The story goes, all Jews were violently exiled by the Romans, wandered the earth for centuries, and suddenly remembered where they came from, just in time for Zionism. But real historians say otherwise. Jews weren't kicked out in one dramatic exile. Many left for trade and better opportunities. Many stayed. Some converted to Islam or Christianity and became Palestinians. In fact, during the Roman period, there were already more Jews outside of Judea than inside it. They built thriving communities across the Middle East, especially in Babylon, modern-day Iraq. Baghdad, in 1910, had one of the largest Jewish populations in the world, and most of them completely uninterested in Zionism. Ottoman Jews, around 300,000 of them, had full freedom to settle in Palestine for centuries. Yet in 1850, fewer than 15,000 actually lived there. That's less than 3%. Why? Because Palestine had fewer opportunities than cities like Istanbul, Izmir, or Salonika. Even when European Jews fled persecution in the early 1900s, the majority didn't choose Palestine. They chose America. Over 2 million European Jews migrated to the West. Only 45,000, about 2%, went to Palestine. So where was the great dream of return? It seems the land of milk and honey wasn't as tempting as New York and job security. Let's be fair. Of course, Jews have a deep spiritual and historical connection to the land of Palestine. So do Muslims and Christians. But turning a spiritual bond into a legend claim of ownership after 2 millennia over the heads of the people who never left, That's not history. That's fantasy. Even the Torah doesn't give you property rights after 2,000 years. And yet Zionism succeeded in convincing the world that this fantasy deserves international recognition and that Palestinians must either accept occupation or leave. Let's flip the script. If a group of Muslims claimed Spain today because of Al-Andalus and demanded sovereignty in Andalusia over Spanish citizens, would the world support it? Or would they call it delusion? So why does Zionism get a pass? Palestinians are the indigenous people of that land. They didn't arrive with tanks and slogans. They lived, worked, and prayed on that soil for centuries. Their claim is not emotional. It's legal, historical, and moral. They deserve what all indigenous people deserve: the right to self-determination on their land, not as refugees, not as second-class citizens, but as a free people in their homeland. May Allah give justice to the oppressed and expose the lies of those who twist history for power. If this video gave you a new perspective or confirmed what you already knew in your heart, like, share, and subscribe. We'll keep telling the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes those in power.